New Landlords from Hell, part of Channel 4 Dispatches, sounded brilliant. This sounded like it would be right up my street. I love documentaries and TV series about either nightmare tenants or nightmare landlords. And this one promised, to quote from Channel 4, a year-long investigation reveals the shocking conditions that tenants of one of Britain's biggest housing associations live in, and the effect those conditions have on vulnerable tenants' health. That sounds gripping, it sounds thrilling. I want the juicy details. I want to know what this housing association is doing. This documentary is 40 minutes, which first of all was a red flag. I thought, well, if you've done a year-long investigation and you're condensing it to 30 minutes, surely there can't be enough there. You know, that's ridiculously condensed. And then once I watched it, because I thought, well, quality, not quantity. And then I watched it, and what it presented was interesting. We got to see some clips of these houses. The conditions were obviously shocking. And we got to know some of the tenants quite personally, and we got to know what it was like living in these houses. But beyond that, there was nothing there. We never really got to know the intricacies of the housing association. They did provide... They didn't speak to the documentary, which, I kind of assumed they wouldn't, because, it's all about shaming them, so why would they? But they did submit a letter or an email or a statement or whatever it was, basically saying, yeah, our houses are up to scratch and we do our best, etc. And I thought, well, that was interesting. But then the documentary just basically ends. And it's like, well, these are the conditions they're in. We're not going to really show you what they've done about it. We're not going to show you kind of after the fact. Bearing in mind this is a year-long investigation, so I would have assumed that perhaps... Let's take a family, for example. This is actually quite a heartbreaking one. Also, they potentially killed somebody. And I'll talk about that in a moment without giving too many details. In fact, I don't care about giving details because I don't really recommend this at all. But there are two stories that particularly stood out. One is about a young boy. I think he's definitely less than a year old, but he's obviously grown up there. And he's got a lung condition. And although they can't be 100% certain that the excessive mould and, toxic conditions of the house caused it, it definitely did exacerbate it. And it got to the point where he couldn't be laid flat or anything because he just couldn't breathe. Now, if they're not doing anything about that, they are potentially giving him a lifelong serious lung condition. And that was emotional. And I thought, well, yeah, all right. What did they do about it? What was the outcome? Is his health better now? But it never did that. And it never gave us any information beyond that. It kind of said, well, here's the problem, but we're not going to show you if or what was done to fix it. The other one is about an elderly gentleman who sadly died. And it's kind of suggested that the conditions of the house were to blame for this. And I won't kind of go into any details just in case you do watch it. But I thought, you're basically saying that their conditions are so bad it resulted in death. And yet the documentary's only half an hour. There is so much that could have been done about that. Like, that could be bordering on criminal negligence. You could take them to court and everything over that if you had enough... information that they'd been in contact and trying to get them to do something. And apparently the hospital had said, because this gentleman actually went into hospital. He wasn't dead immediately. He went into hospital and they said, keep him here. If he goes back to that house, he'll be straight back to hospital. So the medical professionals are saying the conditions of this house were so severe that, it would just make him even more ill. Unfortunately, he did pass away, and I'll let you watch the documentary to find out what caused it. But that's a serious thing, and this documentary just never really progresses past that. If this was a serious, decent, gritty documentary, they'd be knocking on the doors of that housing association, they'd be demanding answers, they'd be involving all kinds of lawyers. It's just a really lazy episode, and I'm really disappointed in it. I'm not disappointed in the documentary. I'm disappointed in the people who made it because they obviously didn't put in any effort. Now, maybe there were legal loopholes. Maybe they couldn't do that. But they should have said that. They should have said, look, we tried to do the right thing. We've given these people a voice. Now we try to help them. But it didn't. It gave them a voice. But it kind of said, well, what can we do? So it's actually a bit shameful that they didn't make any more effort, or if they did, they didn't bother to tell us that they had the right intentions. I obviously can't sit here and say that they didn't try, but there's no suggestion that they did. Watch it if you want to feel better about your own living conditions. Assuming you're in a decent enough accommodation, this will obviously, tug at your heartstrings, but also make you feel better about your own life. Because these people are in, such unfortunate conditions. The houses are horrible. Some of them actually look quite nice in terms of the decor and the layout of the buildings. Look quite nice. It's just there are constant problems that make them uninhabitable, but they still have to be lived in. Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good half hour. It's really poorly developed. The editing is fine, but the actual documentary is poorly put together. It's like an incomplete package, and that's such a shame because it could have had a lot of potential.